Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for spooky cartoons. Dead Space Downfall, released in 2008, is the animated prequel to the popular visceral video game Dead Space. The movie chronicles the events up to Isaac's arrival at the Ishimura and the chaos that occurs when the crew are killed one by the Necromorphs. The story follows Alyssa Vincent and her fellow officers as they futilely attempt to save the ship's crew. Alright, so with that plot synopsis out of the way, I just want to say I know very little about the Dead Space franchise aside from what I've seen in Let's Plays and the wiki. Luckily the movie is set prior to these games, so you can get through it without really needing prior knowledge. Though certain events are more impactful and meaningful if you have that knowledge of the other games. For very significant reasons, I will try my best to include as little footage of the movie as possible. I wasn't aware of how gory it was going to be, and YouTube kind of frowns on that lately, and given the terrible amount of it over the course of the movie, I'd say including it will get my video taken down. For the most part, Downfall tells a competent story of how the Ishimura fell to the Necromorphs. I mean, it probably wasn't all that necessary, but it likely fills in some gaps from the first game, and hey, gotta get on that cash grab. There's nothing too extraordinary here beyond lots of action, scares, and blood. Which is awesome, let me tell you. If you're a horror movie buff, you'll want to at least see this movie, even if you don't know the games. Just from a narrative perspective, you've probably seen parts of what this film does in other movies. It does it well, though. The main character is, like I said above, Alyssa, and she's an annoying temp at a badass female protagonist. But what we get instead is an idiot, so focused on saving the crew she almost dooms humanity. If you've grown at all during this movie, chances are it'll be because of this character. What's odd is she got a really good voice actress, but the lines they gave her just don't do her any justice. Alyssa doesn't make the movie unwatchable, but there are times you might want to strangle her. What are the other main characters though? Oh, you mean cannon fodder 1 through 6? If that doesn't tell you what you need to know, I'll spell it out for you. One thing Downfall suffers from is very little character development. You don't get to really know who these characters are, besides Alyssa and a couple of others, before they're brutally slaughtered in more sickening and satisfying ways than the last. You might start to feel for them by the end, but they're never completely fleshed out beyond 1 or 2 character traits, like the rookie, the chick with the bad haircut, or the black guy. But you're probably not watching this to get to know who these characters are, but rather to watch some blood be shed. And there is a lot of it. So much that I can't show much, if any of it. Do not watch this movie if you're squeamish. The other thing this movie can suffer from at times is its animation. While the art style they went for is decent, if a tad bit average, the movie can suffer from stiff movement, bad frame rate, and just all around cheap animation. It kind of works at times when it comes to the Necromorphs, for obvious reasons, but then other times, it just looks poorly put together. All in all, it's not a deal breaker, it's just disappointing they couldn't have put more time into it. Ultimately, Dead Space Downfall doesn't break any new ground in the horror department, but I can recommend it for its horrifying atmosphere, gruesome kills, and just generally all around exciting moments. Check it out if you ever run across it. And that's it for this review. Let me know below if you've seen it and what you think about it. And if you've got the time, please check out my Patreon. Thanks for watching, and take care. Dead Space, the popular video game series by Visceral Games, has spawned numerous spin-offs. Everything from comic books, to animation. And last Halloween, I reviewed one of these, Dead Space Downfall, a prequel to the events of Dead Space 1. If we recall during that review, I thought it would be a stretch to call Downfall a great movie. It had its moments, particularly the blood and gore, but the story and the characters fell flat. Aftermath, as you would imagine by the title, bridges the events of the first game with its sequel. After Isaac drops a continent on the artifact from the first game, the ship O'Bannon is sent to recover any fragments that may have survived. And of course, all hell breaks loose in traditional Dead Space fashion. Unlike the first movie, this one is structured a little differently. Large parts of the movie is told via flashback, detailing what happened to the crew of the O'Bannon and why only 4 survivors were found. It's an interesting narrative device that sets itself apart immediately from the last film. which it definitely needed to do because otherwise it'd be exactly like the first one. Unsuspecting crew pick up alien artifact, mishap causes people to go insane, and eventually the Necromorphs show up and kill everyone? Sounds a little familiar? The only difference here is that the survivors are retelling these events under duress. There's a larger story at play here, and I think it helps alleviate any feelings of similarity. Not that I would go so far as to say the plot is any better than the first one. Without the framing device, it's just okay. And my god, the voice acting borders on amateurish. Some voice actors do okay, like Cho's and even Kuttner's. But wow, Nolan sounds nothing like he looks. It's like when you watch an anime dubbed for the first time, and they pick the worst possible voice for a character. That, and he just can't act to save his life, in my personal opinion. One of my bigger faults with Downfall was the animation and the animation style. The former was terrible, and the latter was decent. Going into Aftermath, I was shocked to see the CGI that makes up the scenes taking place in the present. They're a cross between PS1 and PS2 early cinematics, something you would find in Resident Evil 2 or Medieval. But during the first flashback, I realized that this film makes use of multiple art styles. All the flashbacks are in traditional 2D animation, though one looks like a mix of both, but all are different from each other. Each time the story changes to another character's narration, the art style switches. The first of these is actually kind of good, and the rest aren't too bad either. I'd certainly take them over the 3D style anyways. A slight minor complaint is that sometimes a character's appearance differs hugely between style shifts. The most egregious of these is Nolan, who looks like a completely different person every single time. The other is Cho, who sports long hair in every animation style but the present scenes, where due to difficulty animating long hair, they just opt for her to have short hair. The thing is, if you knew that her long hair would be tough to animate going into the movie, then why not just have her have the same length in all the styles? Look, it's not that huge a deal, but it's such a weird design choice. It comes off like each animation team didn't coordinate with the others at all. Not to mention that there's some continuity mistakes when they switch between art styles, most notably during the telling of Borges' story in Kuttner's. The area he attacks them in suddenly becomes an interior, and things play out differently, like Borges' cousin speaking before he dies, as opposed to him saying nothing in the first flashback. These are just little annoyances that will bother anyone who picks up on them, but are not hugely detrimental to the overall movie. The bigger thing that might bug fans of the games is the actual appearance of the Necromorphs in this movie. By the time they first show up, the art style they're represented in makes them appear like generic horror anime monsters, as opposed to how they're normally depicted in the video games. Maybe I'm missing something, but they just don't look like Necromorphs that much. Also, for a Dead Space movie, the gore in this one seems almost toned down compared to Downfall. Or maybe that's just me. So the question becomes, is this a good movie to watch? If you're a big fan of the series, then maybe. I haven't played the games, but nothing in this film really seems all that connected to Dead Space 2, other than setting up what I can imagine is a conflict with the Overseer. The only character that survives is Cho and Nolan, the former being reduced to a drooling idiot, and the latter being stored next to Clark. It just didn't feel like a good bridge between the two games, in my opinion. And those are my thoughts on Dead Space Aftermath. What did you think of the movie, if you've seen it? If you have, share your comments down below. Thanks for watching, and take care.